Hello, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my 2024 books video. I apologize if my voice sounds a little bit off and I'm a little low energy. I woke up this morning sick. So annoying. Actually, last night I went to bed with a little bit of a sore throat. Such bad timing because I knew I wanted to film this video tomorrow, but I'm so busy at work, so I'm not surprised that I'm a little worn down and I got sick. Every single year I go through and I rank from worst to the best all of the books that I read this year. I used to do a lot more bookish content when I first started TikTok. Now I don't do as much just because I don't have as much time, but I am reading more, which is really good. I surpassed my reading goal this year, which was really exciting. I had a few years there where I just didn't have as much time to read. I kind of really figured out the second half of 2023, like how much I can read and try and read more. And this year I kind of like really hit the ground running. So I was able to read more books. I also started listening to audiobooks as well, which helped me out. We have 28 books today. If you're new to any of my bookish content though, I do rate series together. So while I've read 28 books, we're gonna have less entries. And I do rate my books, but really I rate my books based on vibes. And sometimes I will say that upon further reflection, sometimes I don't necessarily agree with my first rating, but we'll talk about that as we go along. So grab a cup of tea or a snack because I have a feeling this is gonna be a long one. Let's get into it. It would have been smart for me to organize my books, but I just filmed my TikTok version and now my books are everywhere. Up first, this is at the very bottom. We're going up from worst to best because I feel like that's way more fun. So this is Mrs. Van Gogh and I gave this 2.5 out of 5 stars. This is my lowest rated book of the year and I feel kind of bad about it because this book was a gift. My mom got this for me, I think for my birthday last year. I can't remember, but it was definitely my least favorite of the year. This book follows the story of Vincent van Gogh's sister-in-law. While all the characters are real, a lot of the story is fictionalized. I thought the beginning was really good. It was really exciting about reading about Joanna. Was it Joan? Oh, I have a bookmark. No, it's Joanna. So even though she's Dutch, she goes to Paris to visit her brother. So I thought that part was like really interesting. And then she meets and falls in love with Theo van Gogh, who is Vincent van Gogh's brother, and Vincent van Gogh is like the very famous artist and stuff. So the book follows their romance and then the mental decline of both Vincent and Theo. And if you don't know anything about Vincent van Gogh, he unfortunately suffered from a lot of physical and mental illness. And when he was alive, he wasn't very celebrated. It was actually because of Joanna van Gogh that his work became a lot more broadly recognized. But yeah, it was just really depressing to read some of it. I also didn't feel like the lover connection in between Joanna and Theo. There were some really interesting ideas, but it just wasn't really well fleshed out. Probably would have DNF'd it if it wasn't a gift. So it had a little sprinkle of potential, but it wasn't good. I really was happy when I finished it. Let's do my done pile behind me. Up next we have the book Evermore. If you've never seen my bookshelves, I have a lot of books. When I was a teenager, I had the disposable income to be able to buy books. I would spend all of my money on books. So I have a lot of books from when I was a teenager. I just haven't gone around to reading. And some of them I've decluttered because I just don't think I'm interested. This one I kept because I thought it sounded interesting. It's about Ever, and after her whole entire family dies in a car accident, she gains these magical powers where she can like read their auras, like she can see the aura around them, she can hear them thoughts by touching them and everything. She's kind of just like living her normal everyday life until she meets this mysterious guy Damon, and whenever she's in his presence, her powers go away. So yeah, I thought it was a really interesting premise. That's why I kept it. I also had like the whole entire series too. Yeah, I got it on sale. I forgot how whiny teenagers could be, especially in like 2010s fantasy books. Oh my god, I just couldn't stand Ever. I also didn't feel the chemistry in between Damon and Ever, which surprised me because usually at least the chemistry was like pretty good in these like 2010 books, but I didn't feel it at all. I also felt like there was just too much shoved into this book. Like, it's not even a very big book, but I felt like just so much happened. There was more than enough ideas, I think, for like 3 different types of novels. And for some reason, the author just like wanted everything in this one book. Like I said, there were some interesting parts to it, but I just found Ever insufferable. And I was like, I don't think I want to get on this roller coaster for another 3 books. I did not continue to read the series. And once I'm done this video, I'm going to give it away. But I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Because like I said, there were some really interesting ideas. I thought there was some like nice parts. One of her friendships I thought was cute. I liked her relationship with her sister, but it was pretty meh. So as you'll see, I have a lot of books that are rated the same level, and I kind of like ordered them because, like I said, upon further reflection, like that is like a very like low 3 versus I have others that are like a higher 3. 3 stars for me are like, they're a fine book. I didn't hate them, but they weren't like, oh my god, these are like my favorite book ever. Like 3 is like right in the middle. Up next we have Empire of the Wild. I don't know how I got this book. I think maybe my mom read it and gave it to me. But this is a modern story take, a Métis story. It's a Canadian book. Love that. And it's basically about this woman, Joan, whose husband disappears, and she goes and tries to find and save him. This book had potential, but it just didn't deliver. Even though it's like a pretty short novel, I just felt like it was really long and it dragged out in certain parts. I think part of the issues is that there was a lot of like side stories and side characters that were like explored that I felt took away from the main plot line. And it's supposed to be a thriller horror, and I just didn't feel those elements enough for me. I didn't feel scared, or I didn't feel much suspense. I thought it was really interesting to learn more about Métis culture through this like modern story. Otherwise, I thought it was pretty mediocre. Nonfiction is not usually my jam, but I am trying. I know it's good to sprinkle in a little bit here and there. So I went with this one. I've had it on my shelf for a while. I, in high school, read Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, and I really enjoyed it. Malcolm Gladwell is like really well known for that book, Outliers. The concept, like 10,000 hours, is from there. It's a pretty like popular concept and a lot of people know about it. And yeah, so I thought, you know what, let me try out some of his other books. So this one, The Tipping Point, is about how in any sort of pandemic or like spread of information, like a fashion trend or like when something becomes viral or something like that, there's always like one moment where it goes from like obscurity to like really huge. So he's kind of coined it the tipping point and really explored that in this book. It was definitely really interesting, and I learned a lot. So like overall, I really enjoyed it, but I think there's a couple of things that I think could have made it even better. One, I felt like there was a lot of like individual stories, and I didn't see the overarching theme until the very end. I feel like with fiction books, it can be a lot more subtle, but with my non-fiction, I want it to be a little bit more over the head so I can actually like remember the lesson that is trying to communicate. So it wasn't strong enough for me. So while I might remember some like interesting facts here or there, I still don't really get the whole tipping point thing for me. And I do think that's because this is either his first or one of his first books that he read, versus like Outliers was like he had already written a couple of books. So I think he kind of just like grew as an author as he went along. This book is also over 20 years old, so some things are just outdated, but it was interesting to see how some things still stood the test of time. And I know that he came out with a sequel to The Tipping Point, and I would be very interested to read it because there was just some things that I was just like, oh, I could see this concept applied to this thing today. So yeah, I think I probably will get the sequel. If you're not a big nonfiction fan, I don't think this would be the type of book to get you into nonfiction. I would recommend Outliers over this one. Also, another Canadian book. Look at me. Up next, we have my first of 2 holiday books. I started this a couple years ago that I read holiday books, and now I'm like in it. It's a tradition. I always read 1 or 2 books every single year. This one has been out for a while. I know it's been on a lot of people's like, oh, if you want to read a holiday romance book, they recommend this one. So I finally decided to read it, especially because I got it at Walmart and it was cheap. So this book is about 2 twin sisters. One works in a bakery and the other one works on a baking TV show, and they decide to switch places when one of them can't smell or taste anymore. It definitely gave me the Holly Jolly vibes, and this is definitely a wholesome romance book, which if you're reading in between the lines means that it's not very spicy. So if you like a wholesome book, you'll like this. But if you want some spice, there's not really much in here at all. That's personal preference. I also really like the baking part. I always like baking, especially around the holidays, so that was really fun to read. But something I learned about myself is that I'm not a big fan of the whole entire swapping places trope. I just found it so annoying. The whole entire time I'm reading it, I'm like, when are you gonna tell people? It was so annoying. And you know what? I think that stems from the fact that I usually don't like miscommunication in my romance books. Swapping places is like, there's like lying, you know what I mean? I just want honest communication. Build relationships, and I want it emulated in my romance books. So yeah, that's just personal preference. I found out I don't really like the trope very much, but it's a wholesome book. If you want a wholesome book, I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. Continuing 3 out of 5 stars. Up next we have Yellowface. This book is very niche, and I almost joke that I don't feel like I'm smart enough for this book. So this book is about, what's her name? Is it June? June, she steals a book about, I think it's the Chinese labor force, something like that. She steals a book from her deceased Asian friend, and she passes off the book that like she wrote it herself, and also that she is Asian even though she's white. And I'm kind of really boiling down the plot here. I do think this is a really niche book. I think if you're interested in like the publishing or writing world, you'd find it interesting. If you like discussions on social media and also like race, you would find this interesting, because it's kind of like all of those 3 things together. I found the concept really interesting, and I couldn't guess what was gonna happen. It wasn't predictable. I did find that the ending dragged a little bit. I was like, okay, let's wrap this up. One of my biggest things that I wasn't a fan of was the writing style though. They say that like in writing, you can either show people or you can tell people what's happening. But like there was a lot of like telling in this book. Like June was telling us what happened to her instead of us reading what was happening to her, if that makes any sense. So yeah, just personal preference. I didn't jive with it as much. There's also a lot of like monologues, and I'm just like, okay. I think it was a really interesting book. Maybe not necessarily my cup of tea. I'd be really curious to read R.F. Kuang's other books, because I know people say that this isn't like her other books, that like there's still that like smartness to her in some of her other books, but that this is very different. So I will still check out her other books before writing her off as like not for me. But I know this book was like really popular 2023, a little bit into 2024. So that's my thoughts on it. We're moving up to 3.5 stars. This is Eleanor Affiliate is Completely Fine. So I have the like cheap paperback version, which bugs me, but my mom had read it and they gave it to me. This is a British story. This follows Eleanor, and she is a very quirky woman to say the least, and her life changes when she befriends this guy Raymond, who works at the IT department at her job. Yeah, it was a very easy, funny read, but there were quite a few cringy parts, so if you don't like cringe, there's a lot in it. I'm really sympathetic to Eleanor, and I found it very interesting to learn more about her as the story went on. That being said, I still don't really like her, and I always find it hard when I don't really like the main character to really like a book. The beginning is very slow, just keep that in mind. But yeah, in general, I found all the characters to be really complex and interesting, and there was some really funny moments. Overall, like, I thought it was a good book. I enjoyed it, but it didn't like wow me, you know? I'm not like, oh my god, this is the best book ever. I was like, yeah, that was a nice book. Up next we have our second holiday, 2 out of 2 holiday books, no more after this. This is a sequel to A Merry Little Me Cute. I'm not sure if it was last year or the year before that I read A Merry Little Me Cute at some point, and I really liked that book. Like I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. So when I saw that there was a sequel, I was really excited to read it. This like universe, because there's the 3rd one that has also come out, there's this boy band, and each of the books follows one of the boy band members. Callum is the main character in this one, and he kind of was living out of the spotlight until his sex tape got leaked. The other character is Winnie, who was always known as like the good girl and did a lot of their version of Hallmark Channel movies and was just known as being a really good girl, and then her reputation kind of got a little bit tarnished. So then Winnie and Callum get together to do a spicy holiday movie together. This one, unlike the other one, definitely delivered on the spice. I really enjoyed that part of it. There was a lot of really funny moments. I liked a lot of the side characters. There was like fun holiday cheer. I didn't love either of the main characters. Like they were nice, but I didn't love them. Also, there was a lot of just like purity culture discourse in this book, which like to each their own. It's not as much my cup of tea, especially in a spicy book. I could have done without that. So yeah, I was a little disappointed because I really liked the first one. And like, don't get me wrong, this isn't a bad book. I still gave it 3.75 out of 5 stars because I do give 0.75. I was like, it's just shy of 4 stars. There were just some things, actually, in hindsight, I think I would rate this less because I also forgot when I was writing my rating that there's a trope I really don't like in the second half of the book. So if I could revise, I would give it like 3 stars, but I ordered these based on the ratings when I read the book and I gave it 3.75 at the time. Up next, I don't have the physical books because I listened to them on audiobooks. In the spring, Spotify released audiobooks to their platform. I already had the premium subscription. So I decided, you know what, let's take advantage of this. At the time, the new Bridgerton season was coming out. And I was like, you know what, why don't I do a little refresher, listen to the audiobook. That way I can like learn a little bit and get some more reading done. I was always curious of reading the Bridgerton books, but I do not like the covers and I wasn't committed to buying the fancy limited edition ones if I didn't know I'd like them or not. So I was like, let me just listen to the audiobooks. So I've read 4 of them so far. It's Daphne and Simon are the first season, then season book. Anthony and Kate are the second one. Benedict and Sophie are the third one. And then the fourth one is Colin and Penelope. And I finished the fourth one like right before the holidays. I averaged out that books 1, 2, and 4 I gave 4 stars. And then book 3 I get 3.75 stars. So that averages out to 3.9 stars. Yeah, overall, I would say that like all of the books were good. There's things I don't like about them, but overall I enjoyed them, which is why I gave them 4 stars. That's usually for me 4 stars. It's like I enjoyed the books, but there's like just 1 or 2 things that are keeping me from giving it like 5 out of 5 stars. Perfect no notes type of thing. There are some things that are different in the books compared to the TV show, and it really depends. Some things I like the changes, other things I don't like the changes. I'm not gonna go through every single book because you can go on my Goodreads. And by the way, I have reviews on Goodreads of all of the books. They're not the most detailed, but you get like a little bit of a gist of what I thought about the books. I had to order my favorites. So far, I like Anthony and Kate the most, then Daphne and Simon, then Colin and Penelope, and then my least favorite is Benedict and Sophie. Based on my pace, I should finish the rest of the Bridgerton series this year. I'm excited. Another one, I cannot for the life of me find the book, so you're gonna have to deal with another photo, but this is The Skin You're In. We're in? The Skin We're In, I think. Like I said, I've been wanting to read more nonfiction. This book has been on my bookshelf since it came out in 2020, right around when the Black Lives Movement was really big, and it was on a lot of like Canadian reading lists to like learn more. So I bought it and then I didn't read it. So I finally decided during Black History Month this past year to read it. So Desmond Cole is a journalist in Toronto, and he kind of chronologues some of the Black activism that was happening in Ontario, but like specifically Toronto area. So I enjoyed it because it was able to give me a local perspective on the bigger movement. Since the book is a few years old, when I read it, it was interesting because he would mention some cases that were still in court or happening, and I was able to like Google and find out the resolution of those cases. But I think it would be interesting maybe if he would write up a follow-up book to talk about some of these. I found that he had a really good intersectional scope. He was talking about the Black community, but he was also talking about like the Indigenous community and mental health. I had something else in my notes as well. But yeah, he had a very intersectional lens. I just found that there was something missing for me. And I read this one review that kind of like resonated, that someone said that this book is a lot more about Black activism and inspiring and encouraging Black people to activism than it is a book about Black allyship, which I really kind of felt was true. I didn't finish the book feeling like, oh, this is what I could do to help the Black community, which that doesn't mean that's what it was meant for. That's just how I felt leaving the book. Overall, it was a really good book. Like I said, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars because I thought it was pretty good, but there's just something missing from it for me from being like a perfect book. We're throwing it all the way back to the first book I read in 2024. This is A Paper Palace. I had to literally Google the synopsis because I couldn't remember much about what actually happened in the plot, which will make sense when I explain my review. This story follows Elle. It kind of follows like 2 timelines. So one timeline is that she had just cheated on her husband with her high school sweetheart, or childhood sweetheart, tells the like 24 hours after that. But then it also goes back in time and kind of explains her like childhood and her life leading up to that point. This book is so beautifully written and so descriptive. It has a really strong sense of place. I remembered certain aspects of the book, like I could conjure up the pictures in my mind that were described in this book, but I couldn't remember the plot because the plot is like pretty dark and depressing. So I think that's why my brain kind of like forgot about it. I highly recommend checking trigger warnings before reading this book because it's pretty depressing, some pretty heavy subject matter. So that's why I was really conflicted give the rating for this book, because I enjoyed reading it in the sense that it was very beautiful and easy to read and almost like lyrical in some spots, but then it was just so dark and heavy in other spots. So I'm like, ugh. Reading dark subject matter is always like a hit or miss for me because it's real life, you know, it's not always like enjoyable. And for me, like I read for enjoyment, so it's not necessarily an enjoyable book, but it's a very well written book. So that's why I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Another one, I don't have the physical copy because I read this on my mom's e-reader. We were gonna read this as a book club book, and then we never had our book club meeting, but my mom had read it on her e-reader, so that's why I don't have the physical book. And the Midnight Library was like really popular, so I was like, okay, I feel like it's good to read it because a lot of people talked about it. So this book follows Nora. She is kind of in between life and death and needs to decide what she wants to do, if she wants to die or not, but she has the opportunity to live all of these other different lives in different scenarios. It was pretty depressing at the beginning. As you can imagine, I don't know if I mentioned this, but like Nora had committed suicide. So it was very depressing at the beginning, kind of reading why she made that decision. And it's also a pretty philosophical book, which for me, I don't mind a philosophical book, but it's not necessarily something I like reach for all the time. I couldn't put my finger on it until I read a review, but someone had described this as a self-help book disguised as fiction. And it's totally true because especially like near the end, there was just a lot of like, this is a moral of the story and like, this is why you should want to live and all this stuff. There's some pretty like preachy monologues. And listen, if you love self-help, power to you, but I'm not a really big fan of self-help books. This comes from someone who likes therapy and meditation and everything like that. I'm all for improving yourself, but self-help books are just not for me. But that being said, it was a very interesting concept. I love really reading all the different lives. Yeah, it was just a really interesting book, a really interesting concept. I think this would be an amazing TV series. I think it would translate really well to like an episodic visual nature. Yeah, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Sorry if I'm in a different spot. So I had to take a little break to make a cup of tea latte. I thought this mug was very fitting. Up next, we have my one spooky season read. This is Watch Out for Her, and this is actually a Canadian book. I did pretty good reading Canadian books this year. This is about a woman who hires a nanny. Once a relationship sours in between the two of them, she moves her family from Vancouver to Toronto. But in Toronto, some suspicious things are still happening. I really liked that there was 2 points of view. You were going in between, what are their names? Sarah is the mother and then Holly is the nanny. So it switches in between their 2 points of view. And then Sarah is in the present day in Toronto, and then Holly is telling about the past in Vancouver, and then the 2 timelines kind of meet together. So I thought it was a really good way to keep the book really engaging and suspenseful. And it wasn't too predictable. It was maybe like only a chapter or 2 before that I was able to guess it. My whole entire thing is that I don't mind predictability and like romance books and stuff, but usually when there's thrillers or plot twists, I don't like to be able to guess it. The fact that it wasn't too predictable was pretty good. Even though it had some suspense, it wasn't necessarily the most thrilling book, if that made any sense. I think it was enjoyable to read, but I don't think it's necessarily the most memorable thriller that I've ever read. I don't necessarily see myself thinking back being like, wow, I was so surprised or shocked. I never saw that coming. So yeah, if you're a really big thriller or if you want to read like a Canadian thriller, I would recommend this one. But I wouldn't say it's like the best thriller out there. It was good. That's why I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Normally, I rate series together, but this is like a standalone series, so I did read them separate. This was probably one of the biggest books of the summer this year, I think, just from the summer by Abby Jimenez. But before I'd read it, and I'm really happy that I saw this TikTok, someone had explained that it was a part of a standalone series. And I always prefer reading standalone series in order. I just get so much more enjoyment out of them. So that's what I did. I went back and I read the other 2 books before I read this one. But that being said, this is probably my least favorite out of the 3. And I still enjoyed it. I still gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. And I think if I hadn't read the other ones, maybe I would have liked it more. But actually, to be fair, I did enjoy this more because I read the other 2. Just to lay a little groundwork. The characters are all connected in between all of the books. This one is about Justin and Emma. They meet actually through Reddit and they decide to have just a romance for the summer because she's only in town for the summer and then she's supposed to leave. So they don't want to have anything like serious or anything. That's what it's called, just for the summer. I found that it just didn't connect to the 2 main characters as much as the other ones in the other books in the series. And like I've mentioned already in this video, that like my ability to connect with the characters and like the characters usually will affect my enjoyment of the novel. But I did enjoy the relationship of the 3 books that I've read. I've found that even though they're like fun romances, they usually deal with some like pretty heavy subject matter as well. And this one I just found the hardest to read about. Emma has a really difficult relationship with her mother and it was just like, you know, it was just harder to read. That being said, this does have a slow burn to the book and that really like helped push me through it. I just wanted to read them getting together. I really liked how this book wrapped up a lot of the threads and storylines from the other 2 novels, and this is the last of the 3, and it really did a good job of completing it. So yeah, I really enjoyed this novel. If you want to read it, I really do recommend reading the other 2. I think it'll help your enjoyment. Yeah, I give it 4 out of 5 stars. But the cover, definitely the best. We have the first of 2 Emily Henry books, and I've read 2 of her other books as well. So I've read 4 out of the 5 Emily Henry books now at this point. And this is my least favorite so far. Usually Emily Henry books always makes me cry, and not from like sadness, but just like I love type of crying, and I did not get that in this book. This book follows Daphne and Miles, and they get together because their exes get together. So they kind of get together to spite them. There's so many other tropes and storylines packed into this book, which is part of the reason why it's not as much as my favorite. It wasn't as much of a clear and consistent storyline. There was just like too much like meandering. I think that Emily Henry had a lot of good ideas and she just wanted to try and fit them all into this book, but I feel like she should have maybe saved a couple of things for another story. I wasn't a big Daphne fan. Like I mentioned, when I don't like someone as much, usually will affect my enjoyment, but I really liked Miles and I thought they had really good chemistry together. I loved all of the side characters. They're so great. Emily Henry does a really good job of having a good sense of place. This was set in like Michigan, I think, and it just felt like I was spending a summer day in Michigan, which was really fun. I enjoyed it. I still gave it 4 out of 5 stars, but when I like rank it and I compare it to some of Emily Henry's other books, not as much for me. Okay, now we're moving up into 4.5 territory, which means that there was just something missing from this being a perfect book for me. This was another gift. My mom redeemed herself after Miss Van Gogh with this one. This is such a good book. And as you can see, it was like a Oprah book club. So this is like a modern take on Little Women. They say it plays homage to Little Women, and they actually like do reference Little Women in this book. It's one of the jokes in between the 4 sisters of like which sister is which sister. I do like Little Women. It's been a little bit since I've read the books, but I have read them, so I get like the reference and stuff. But basically it's about 4 sisters and this guy William and how their lives are like interconnected, and it spans many years. It starts when William and the oldest sister Julia meet as freshmen in college, and it spans until they're like in their 50s or 40s or something like that. It's quite a beautiful book. The language is just like descriptive without being too flowery. The pacing is perfect, where you like get a sense of a period of time, but then it moves on without it starting to drag. So the pacing was perfect. I loved all of the characters in the sense that like they were all so well developed. I don't necessarily love all of the characters, but I loved their characterization, if that makes sense. That like I thought they were so complex and unique, and like they had a great character development, which is something I really appreciated. I don't necessarily need to love every single character, but I think if I see their growth and understand why they tick, then I will appreciate them. This is like a small, like, personal thing, but I found it really interesting because the main characters are the same age as my parents. So for me, it was interesting to like to see how the world was through like the character's perspective, knowing that it was like a similar time that my parents were going through, like when they were in college, my parents were in college. And I don't know, that was just a little interesting thing that I did not expect, that I really enjoyed. My one complaint is that it's a pretty sad book. I think I just needed a little bit more levity to make it that much more perfect. This is actually like an aside, but I was reading this interview with Louise Penny, who's a prolific Canadian author. I have all of her books on my bookshelf actually, because my mom absolutely loves her books. She does like thriller murder mysteries, and she was explaining how like she always adds a little bit of humor to her books because you need that break to be able to like better appreciate, in her case, like the murder mystery that's going on. And I think that's what the one thing that was missing from this book for me, is that I wish there was just a few more happy moments throughout, so that way you could feel the sadness that much more. That's my one bit of feedback. And also I was very surprised because it's technically a historical novel, but like it also could be a little bit lit fic, and we all know lit fic is not my cup of tea. So I was very impressed that I liked this book. I actually liked it so much I gave it to my brother's girlfriend for Christmas because she does like lit fic, historical fiction, so I thought she would really enjoy it. So there you go, you know it's a good book when I gift it to other people. So up next we have, nope, I am holding two different books. The next two series is Crescent City and Fourth Wing. I don't know why I'm holding it like this. Technically, based on my rating system, Fourth Wing is higher than Crescent City. Because Fourth Wing isn't finished, I decided to put lower on my ranking, just because you never know with future books how I feel. Up next, we have Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. And I don't know what my brother did with Iron Flame, this jacket. He is technically still reading it. I don't know why. This man has been reading it for months. Maybe he will finally get around to finishing it, because Onyx Storm, the third book, is literally coming out next week. So I'm very excited about that. I gave Fourth Wing 5 stars and then Iron Flame 4.5 stars, so that averaged out to 4.75 stars. This was the first time in a while that I was not able to put down a series, and the first time in a while that I've really been into a fantasy series. If you don't know what Fourth Wing is about, because I feel like it's everywhere, but if you don't know, it is a series about this girl. It's a fantasy series. I think they technically call it a romantasy, a blend in between romance and fantasy. So the book follows Violet, and despite some of her physical disabilities, she gets into this elite dragon riding college, and she gets a dragon, and it kind of like goes from there. That's basically like the beginning plot of the first book. But yeah, like I said, the first book was the first book in a while that I could not put down. I was so into it. I thought that the writing and world was very easy to follow. I will say that one of my complaints in the second book is I kind of wish they did a little bit more world building. I feel like this book and Crescent City are kind of like on two ends. The world is very simple in Fourth Wing, and I wish it was a little bit more developed. Whereas in Crescent City, the world is so built that there's like so much info dumping, and I kind of want somewhere in between. I found that I enjoyed Violet in the first book. She kind of started to get annoying in the second book, but in the first book, she was pretty likable. I love the dragons. Who doesn't love dragons? And I think the magic and the dragons were so well done. In the second book, I found it a little bit annoying when Violet and the main character, Zayden, were like fighting. You know, I always find it annoying when couples fight in books. But yeah, the plot twist, there's always plot twists in between the books. So the plot twist in between the second book and the plot twist for the end of the second book makes me so excited for the third book and to see where it goes. I'm just really excited to read the new book when it comes out. We'll see once, like, I think there's like 5 books or something planned in the series, so we'll see if it like lives up to the hype all the way through. But so far I really enjoyed it. And then, like I said, up next we have, let me hold up all the books just for 1 second because they're massive. That's some big books. We have the Crescent City series. This is the newest series, in the Sarah J Maas universe. When did this book come out? Yeah, this came out in 2024. That's why I waited to start this series, because I read the other two Sarah J Maas books a couple years ago, but I wanted to wait because I knew that this book was coming out. And I was like, I just want to wait until they're out. That way I don't have to like wait for the books to come out. So I waited to start the series until the third and final book came out. I'm happy that I did because I really enjoyed it and I would hate to wait. So the Crescent City series is, how do I describe it? It's like if a fantasy book was set in a modern world. Like they have cell phones and TVs and all of this modern technology. So that was super interesting. So basically Bryce is a half human, half fairy, and she needs to work with Hunt, who's an angel, to solve like a murder mystery. And that's just like the tip of the iceberg, like all fantasy novels are. I had heard a lot of people cried after reading the first book, and I was just like, how could you do that? How can you get so connected? But it's so true, because when you think about it, this book is like 800 pages long. That's like 3 books, 2 or 3 books in a normal series. And yeah, you just get to know the characters so well. They're so well developed that yeah, I definitely was crying at the end. Oh, here comes my cat. Meow meow. Like I said, there's a lot of info dumping in all 3 of these books, but the world is just so interesting and unique that like once you get over the info dumping, it's just so interesting. I just fell in love with it. It's definitely my favorite world out of all 3 of the Sarah J Maas books. I love the murder mystery aspect to it, along with the slow burn romance. Just made me like read through these books so quickly, which is impressive because they're really big. The second book was a bit of a step down for me. I just felt like there was too many side characters and side storylines going on. We have a visitor. Say hi. What was I saying? Yeah, there's just too much going on in the second book, but I understand that it laid a lot of the groundwork for the third and final book, and I really enjoyed the third book. So my ratings were like 5 stars for book 1 and 3, and 4 stars for book 2. But yeah, this one I just felt like the pacing was really good. You could really like feel the build up for like the really big battle at the end of the book. Also, there's like some crossover into the Akatar world in this book, which I found was really fun. And overall, I thought it was a really good conclusion to Bryce and Hunt's story. I was really happy with the end. It has been confirmed that there's going to be other books set in this universe, but that like the story of Bryce and Hunt is like done. So yeah, I really enjoyed the series. This was definitely like the year of like romantasy for me, reading 2 of the most like popular series, but I really enjoyed them. And now we're gonna end off with 3 romance books, because even though I really had my romantasy moments, romance books are where it's at for me. At number 3, in my final 3, we have Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, which is the second book. So this book follows Brianna, who is, nope, this is the wrong one. This is the one I wanted to talk about. This is Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. This follows Brianna, who's a best friend of the girl in the first book, and her new coworker, Jacob. I think I read this in like 3 or 4 days or something like that. It was a slow burn romance, which like, I didn't know I was a really big slow burn fan, but apparently this year was a year of me really enjoying slow burn romances. They just like make me want to read the book until they like get together and stuff like that. So I really like that. Also, I love a good fake dating trope, so I love this. I just really enjoyed the relationship and chemistry in between Brianna and Jacob. Also, Jacob has anxiety, and it was so amazing how Brianna handled Jacob's anxiety. That was just so beautiful. This is like a minor spoiler, but there's a third act breakup, which I kind of hated books, but overall I really did enjoy this one. Not as much as the first book. I definitely still really enjoyed it. Okay, this was really hard to pick which one of these 2 were my favorite book of the year, but ultimately I decided to pick this one as my first and this one as my second, mainly because I read this in one sitting. I read this back on the plane from Portugal. I was flying from Porto to Toronto. I brought this book with me. I had read it at all. So while I was waiting in the boarding zone, that's the word for it, I started reading it, and then I got into it, and then I read the whole entire book on the plane right back. So it is a 7-hour flight. So yeah, I read it in one sitting. So that's the only reason why I decided to rank it down, because I don't know if it would like hit the same way if I hadn't read it all in one sitting. And I'm a little hazy on some of the details because of that. But this book follows January and Gus. They're both best-selling writers. They went to college together, and then many years later, they end up both spending the summer beside each other. And they are both writers, and they decide to swap genres to try and get them out of a writing slump. And it kind of goes from there. I found it so interesting to read about writers. It's like kind of meta, but it was just interesting to read about their approach to writing and everything. And also, one of the subplots is that Gus is writing about a cult, so they're talking about like cults, and that was kind of fun. I did cry like an absolute baby at one point. That was just a tad embarrassing because I was on a plane so the people beside me were probably looking at me like, what is this girl okay? Yeah, that was really good. Like I said, Emily Henry books really make me cry, and not in the sense that it's sadness, but just like love. Overall, I really like this book. I rated this my second favorite Emily Henry book. People We Meet on Vacation is still my number one, but this is a good second book. If you haven't checked it already, I definitely recommend reading Beach Read. And then finally, my number one, we have Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. I love a silly, goofy book. Okay, what can I say? Something about just a good romance book makes me kick my feet in happiness, and this is definitely it. This book follows Alexis and Daniel. They kind of come from different worlds. There's a bit of an age gap, but they have a one-night stand, and then they end up deciding to pursue a relationship together. Because they're long distance, it's almost like a slow burn where it's just like, I just want to read when they're together. So I would kind of just like, okay, I just want to like read until a chapter they're together, and then I'll put the book down. So it helped like make me go really quickly through the book. I couldn't put it down. Yeah, Daniel is just such an amazing book boyfriend. Like, oh, he's so incredible. And I can totally relate to Alexis in some ways. One of the big things is that she's kind of in this job she's not really happy with, but she can't feel like she can't quit. And as someone who went through that, I definitely feel it, that like it is kind of annoying to like read it and be like, girl, just quit. But sometimes when you're in it, you don't realize that's an option until someone says it to you. So I definitely found that relatable. So I think that's why I just love this book so much, where there was this combination of like relatability and a main character, just like an amazing hot boyfriend, great steamy scenes, which is surprising because the first one was Fade to Black. So I was like, oh, is it gonna be that type of romance novel? But then like later there are some really good scenes, and it's just like funny. There's also little sprinkles of magical realism, which I found really fun. So yeah, I just really enjoyed this book. I think it is one of my favorites. Well, I've just ranked it as my favorite of the year, but I really enjoyed it, and I definitely want to check out other books by Abby Jimenez. And I think the like 3 standalone books together as a whole were just really fun read for me this summer. So yeah, well, that was a very long video to film, and I'm sure the final product is going to be really long, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you stuck around to the end, please like this video because I really appreciate it, and let me know in the comments what your favorite book was last year. I have upped my goal this year of 30 books. I mean, I read 28 last year, so I don't think it'll be that difficult because sometimes I do go through reading slumps. So, and I also read 3 massive books. So I definitely think I can reach my goal of 30 books this year. But within that, I've made a sub goal. I want to read 5 classic books. I might have mentioned this in some vlogs and stuff, but I have a whole collection of classic books. They're gorgeous editions. I'll show you actually. I'm currently reading one, which is Anne of Green Gables, but look how beautiful these are. But yeah, I own all these classic books. Majority of them I haven't read, so I'm challenging myself to read 5. I thought that was a pretty good goal, because that means like every 2.5 months I have to read a classic book. So I thought that's a good balance in between reading other books on my bookshelf and reading some of my classics. So let me also know what your reading goals are. I'd love to hear it. Please subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any new videos. That is it for today's video, friends, and I'll see you in another one super soon.